How's it going today?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really excited for this interview. I think I've been trying to get in touch with you for a while and get this interview set up. So I'm really excited to get going with this.
Cool.
So first of all, obviously this is a really weird time for you and for all wrestlers across the country. What has training been like for you this summer? Just take me back the last 2 months. What's a day in the life like for Maya Nelson?
Well, actually, I recently had shoulder surgery. I got it in May 26th to be exact. So I've been actually healing from surgery. I tore my labrum last October,
Where
and
was
I
that?
was
Was that just in practice?
no, it was at U23 Worlds. It was in my repechage match. I shot in for a double, and then my shoulder came completely out the socket. It was very painful, and then I had to, take myself out of the rest of the tournament, which
Yeah.
was unfortunate. But I knew that I was still trying to make an Olympic team, and so I talked with my trainers at the time. They're like, yeah, it's torn, but I guess we can just see how good you do. I went to nationals in December. I made it to the finals because I needed to get my bid for Olympic trials. And then
Mm-hmm.
I opted out of the finals just so I could have more time to get as healthy as I possibly could.
Right.
And then COVID happened, and I talked to my coaches, and I was like, I need this surgery. So I think I'm going to get it during this downtime. And that's when I got my surgery, and I've been healing ever since. So a day in the life for me is I'm still at the Olympic Training Center, and I usually go in for lifts at 9 a.m. And then after my 9 a.m. lift, I have rehab from about 10 to 11. And then I'm usually free after that. So I'll go, now that I can run and stuff without my shoulder hurting, I'll go for a run or go sit outside or something like that.
Yeah. Well, there's really no good time for an injury, but if you had to pick a time, this is a good one.
And that's what
Um,
everybody's been telling me, man.
yeah, that's funny. So are you totally recovered now, or are you still in rehab?
I'm still in rehab. I don't even have full range of motion back, but I am
Wow.
doing really good with my rehab, and I'm doing really good with getting back and being stronger. And I'm on a really good track right now, so have the best care here. So
Yeah, that's a good place to be a top level wrestler. But let's take it back to the beginning of your career and just where it all started. How did you get involved in the sport of wrestling? Because obviously when you started at that time, there really was not much of a call for women's wrestling, but that's grown a lot since then. But how did you get involved in the sport?
I started when I was about 4 years old. My dad is a little league coach, and he still coaches little league here in Colorado. He has a little team in Denver, but he was a workaholic, and I wanted to be daddy's little girl. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do all the sports that he coaches. So I asked my mom and my dad, and I was like, hey, can I wrestle? Like 3.5 years old, this little chunky little Maya asking her parents, and they were completely on board. And I'm so grateful to have a great support system with them, because some parents are opposed to that, especially because I was growing up in a time where women or girls weren't really wrestling. So I started wrestling when I was 4, lost every single match for the first 2 years. And then I guess I finally won, and I was like, I like this feeling. So I continued to wrestle after that. Obviously, look where I'm at.
So when you first started to love it, was that right away, or was it when you started to find some success? When did you first start to love the sport?
Man, I want to say that it was fate, because there's no other reason why a 4-year-old can go through 2 years of poundings and not quit. So I want to
Hmm.
say it's fate. It was love at first sight, and I don't know, I just was a strong kid, I guess, because I continued. And then when I did start winning, it was like, oh, this was that feeling I was chasing after, even
Yeah.
though I had lost so many times and cried so many times by that point.
So what do you think about it drew you in so much? Because obviously it was a weird position for you to be in. Not many girls really loved wrestling. What do you think about it did you like so much?
I think it was the challenge for sure. I've always liked being challenged, and I think wrestling, like, it's a constant challenge. It's never easy. Nothing is ever given to you. So I think it was the challenge, and on top of that, I really like the hard work and like putting out that hard work and getting results back from that. And I think I was always been a little stubborn. So there were some people that didn't want me to wrestle and really did try to push me out. But in my head, I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. Like, you can't tell me what I can and can't do. So I think all of that together really let me thrive in the sport.
Yeah. So as you started to get older, were you starting to wrestle more girls, or was it pretty much when you were growing up, you just wrestled boys?
As I was getting older, I think my mom and dad, they started looking more into, getting me to all girls tournaments. So my first girls tournament, I want to say it was like maybe 11 or 12. And they had this tournament in Michigan, and it was all girls. And that was the first time I had wrestled all girls. And, prior to that, I had seen, because Adeline Gray is also from Colorado. So I'd seen her growing up, and how much success she was having too. So that was nice to see another woman wrestle, because, we all have people that we look up to, and it's always nice to see yourself in someone. And her being a woman, I was like, oh, I can do it if Adeline, continuing to do it. And so my first tournament was in Michigan. And as I grew older, there were more tournaments that I could go to, because then I was going to Oklahoma. And then I finally met Erin Tomio, or Erin Vandiver now. I met her through Chad Vandiver, and they kind of introduced me into USA Wrestling. And that's when I started going to Body Bar. That's what it was called at the time. And I started making teams and just gaining more success on the USA Wrestling aspect.
So you mentioned Adeline. So you guys both grew up. Were you guys close to each other in distance?
We didn't live very close to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but we were both pretty much in Denver. So I would see her at tournaments. So like we were like, I couldn't just walk down the street and I'd be by her, but I saw her at very many tournaments growing up.
What is she? Is she 5 or 6 years older than you?
I don't know. I think so. Probably. That sounds about right. Like 6 years older than me.
So she kind of paved the way. She was like at the tournaments, but in high school division or something when you were 5th grade.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool that you guys are now right at making world teams and stuff together on that level. Mm-hmm. Wrestling Final X and stuff like that. That's really cool that from the young age you guys knew each other, and then now you're at this level. That's really, really cool.
For sure. And she's a good friend of mine. And it, when she started making teams, she would say things like, oh my, I can't wait to be on teams together. And when I was younger, I was like, okay, like that's cool that you believe in me, but it's definitely nice to have friends like that around you, because they push you to, bigger heights, and it pushes you to be better.
So when you were growing up in your club, did you wrestle at your dad's Little League club, or did you wrestle at another club?
No, I wrestled at my dad's Little League club, and the whole daddy's little girl thing didn't really work out, because he just worked me harder than everyone else, which was obviously a good thing. But, I started giving up weekends a lot sooner than other little kids. Like we'd be like, he'd wake me up on Saturdays and be like, come on, we're going to the field. And then I would be doing hill sprints and stuff. But yeah, so I wrestled in his, it was Blue Knights before, but now it's just the Knights. So yeah, the Knights Wrestling Club, that's where I grew up.
And did you wrestle with them all the way through your high school, all the way through?
Well, so I wrestled them from 4 years old till 8th grade. And then when I got to high school, it was a cool dynamic, because my high school coach was great. I love my high school coach, like shout out to Coach Randy. But so my dad kind of released me from being under him as an athlete, and he kind of took on the dad role again instead of the coach role. And then he let my high school coach me throughout high school. So it was a really good dynamic, and everybody was on the same page.
So when you got into high school, has Colorado sanctioned women's wrestling yet?
They sanctioned it. So the first state championship that was sanctioned was last year.
Last year. So you really just missed it.
Yeah, I just missed it. But at the end of the day, as long as now that they have that option, like, it's so humbling to go into that room and see so many women wrestling. And my alma mater, my high school, two girls actually won state last year. So that was really cool to see too. Yeah. So and I go back to them and I help them out sometimes, but yeah, it's cool.
So you wrestled in the boys state tournament all 4 years?
Not all 4 years. I made it my junior year and my senior year. And my junior year, I won a match. So both of them obviously like historical runs, but yeah, I did my senior year. I didn't do as well.
Well, that's still super, super impressive. But did you, when you were training, were you training mostly with boys, and who were some of your training partners?
So I pretty much only trained with boys, like from 4 years old till my senior year. I pretty much only trained with boys. The only time I got to train with the girls was when USA Wrestling had camps. I was the only girl on my team while I was in high school, which for me, like, I'm so glad I had a positive experience, because my teammates, they respected me. They listened to me because I was a team captain my junior and senior year. So I had a really positive experience. And, you know, my workout partners were David Kavanaugh and this kid named Polo and Dominic Resendez. So they're really, really good friends now, and they really push me in the room. And I think whenever you have someone, like, when it comes to partners, like, you have to have someone that's going to throw their ego out the window, because if you're just butting heads and bullying each other the whole time, then you're not getting anything out of it. So I was very fortunate, very, very fortunate to have a great team, great partners, great coaches. Like, literally every day, I am so blessed for that opportunity, for sure.
Absolutely. So I guess at the time you were wrestling all folk style, but girls wrestling has started to move a lot freestyle high school and college. When did you first get introduced to freestyle? Did you wrestle that from a young age?
I got introduced probably in middle school, and I was wrestling boys in freestyle and stuff. And I remember my first freestyle match. I'm pretty sure I got thrown like 3 times because I was like doing a double, and I kept, you know, running into them, and they just body locked me and threw me over. So I had to learn not to do that, obviously. So it was definitely middle school when I got introduced, but actually practicing freestyle, that was my freshman year. That's when I actually started practicing freestyle. I had a coach. I had Chad Vandiver. If you don't know, he's a Greco wrestler, but he was my coach in this little MMA wrestling gym. It was him and Lindsay Durlocker. I don't know if you remember him. He was a great man. And so I had them to teach me freestyle and, you know, the style of Olympic wrestling. So that was, you know, I dived into that my freshman year, and I loved it. I love freestyle.
It's a lot of fun. So when you were in high school, were you recruited by Cumberland's, and what was that recruiting process like for you?
I was recruited by Cumberland's. I actually met the coach at a USA Wrestling camp, and he was there. And he talked to me, and he was like, "You're a very hard worker. I really like that. I think you'd be really good for the team." And at the time, I kind of like, I thought it was going to go a different way. I thought I was going to be recruited by a lot of schools, and I really wasn't. But 2 schools did actively recruit me, actively talk to me. And I actually went to visit both of them, and Cumberland seemed like a better fit. So when I went there, I was very down to business. I didn't hang out with a lot of people. It was mostly I would go to my classes. I would go to rehab or something because I've had a lot of injuries over my career, but I would go to rehab and then I'd go straight to practice. And I was just very focused in college.
So you knew you wanted to wrestle in college from early on, right?
Yeah. I knew like college was already, my family, my mom and dad, they really pushed like, you got to be in college, you got to get your degree. So I already knew I was going to college and I knew wrestling was going to get me out of, the area that I grew up in. So I already knew that I was going to go to college for wrestling on a scholarship because that was the only way I could afford any type of schooling. So.
Yeah. So your first world team, you made the junior world team. What made you decide you wanted to compete in the junior world team trials? When did you first start thinking, hey, some of my goals are I want to be an Olympic champion, I want to be a world champion? When did that first start to cross your mind?
Oh, man, I want to say when I first went to Pan Am's I think 2014, that was my first Pan Am's, and I won Pan Am's. It was in Brazil, and it was a really good experience for me. But I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I really, really want to be an Olympic champion. And at that time, I've been wrestling for so many years, and I was like, this is the end all be all, like Olympic champion. You can't get any better than that. So I think, around 2014, when I went to Pan Am's, I was like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. I'm going to work hard for this. And then finally, I was always number 2, I was losing to Becca Leathers. I was losing to Kayla Miracle. I was losing to Shia Allo, and I was always number 2. And finally, 2016, I went there and I was like, you know what? No one's beating me. I'm tired of this. I'm not going to be beat. And I actually moved up a weight class. I was cutting down pretty hard to 58 for a while. And I moved up to 63 kilos because that was the weight class at the time. And I made the team and I was like, okay. So finally, all this hard work is starting to pay off. First step, making the team.
So what was the first trip you had? Was Pan Am's out of the country, or was that
Yes.
was that in the United States?
No, it was, so the first trip I had was Pan Am's, and it was in Recife, Brazil. And then that same year, I also was able to do a tour. It was a double tour, and I got to go to Germany and Austria. So all of that, I love traveling. Like when I was little, when they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, I used to always say a traveler, even though that's not a job, but that's what I wanted to be. So when I had the opportunity to travel and do something that I love, like wrestling, I was like, oh, this is definitely what I was shooting for when I was, a little girl telling people what I wanted to be when I grew up.
I bet that was really fun for you. How old were you at the time when you first went to Pan Am's?
Oh man, 2014. That's like junior year of high school.
About 17.
16. I was young when I was in high school. I skipped kindergarten and I just went like straight to first grade. So yeah, I was a little young. So 16, I believe.
16.
Maybe 17. Yeah.
That'd be a really fun trip for 16. And how did you do at Pan Am's?
I won. Yeah,
that makes it a lot more fun, doesn't it?
I won, and it was, like I said, it was a great experience. I was just like, oh man, like at first I was nervous because I feel like a lot of times, a lot of young wrestlers, they put a lot of pressure on like, oh, this girl is from a different country. Like, I don't know what she's going to do, but you kind of just, if you just get that out of your brain, you're like, wrestling is wrestling. There's nothing they're going to do that you have not seen before. So once I got that out of my head, I just went out there and I was just wrecking shop. I think I teched everybody through the finals. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. So what was it like when you first got on campus at Cumberland? Was the training different than what you were used to in high school, or was it different when you were wrestling just all girls? What was that environment like when you first got there?
It was, first off, it was very cool. Like I loved my teammates, and to this day I'll call them and check up on them. It was really cool because I had always been on a men's team and I was always the minority. And, you know, like they all always did respect me, but it's just a different setting when you're around other girls, and girls just wrestle differently as well. They're a lot more flexible. Their hips are a lot more stronger. So that was just totally different aspect. And I think for me also, I think when I went to college, I don't know if I was hoping or under the impression that, you know, everybody wants to be a champion, right? But sometimes some people just go to college for the scholarship. And like, so I did have to separate some of my feelings towards that, because these girls are great people. But some of them didn't want to be champions. And I think like for me, I had never experienced like everyone not wanting to just win, you know? So it was definitely a different level for sure.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So was it harder? Was the training more rigorous, or was it about what you were used to?
I wouldn't say it was harder. My high school coach was, to this day, he's still crazy, but my high school coach used to work us so hard. So it definitely was not harder. And I, you know, had a lot of putting myself in situations that were uncomfortable. So when I did get to this college program, it was a really easy transition because I knew what I had to do to be the best. And so I did a lot of workouts on my own. And I actually like that aspect of college, because they treat you like an adult, you know, like you get what you want out of it. If you want to be a champion, you have to put in the work. And so I was one of those people where I was putting in the work. I was doing extra work. I was making sure I got what I needed, because, and Terry Steiner really likes to say this. He's always like, you know, nobody cares how you feel. And it's definitely true when you start becoming an adult, you're like, oh, okay, I need to do this on my own if I really want this. So yeah, going in with that mindset, I, you know, did pretty well.
That makes sense. So what was your college wrestling career like? Were you successful like you wanted to be? And then when did you start looking forward to moving out to the Olympic Training Center and starting to focus back on international wrestling?
So I was very successful. I went undefeated the whole time I was in college. Unfortunately, I suffered some injuries. So I never went to, it was WCWA Nationals when I was in college, and I never went because the first
you
time.
You never went to it?
No, the first year, my freshman year, I actually got injured at the Dave Schultz tournament, and I was very close to tearing my, it's a muscle in my thigh. I can't. I was very close to tearing something in my thigh. And that was like 2 weeks before nationals. And so I did not go to nationals my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, some stuff happened and I had to leave. And that was in January of my sophomore year. So we were, you know, just trying to peak for nationals, and some things happened, and I had to move. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I definitely needed to get out of that situation. And I moved to the Olympic Training Center in January of 2017, which, you know, for me, I'm always like, you know what, everything happens for a reason. And for sure that year, that definitely happened for a reason, because that's also when I won my world championship. So
yeah. Well, that's really cool that you were able to battle back from that. So you've had a bunch of injuries throughout the years.
oh yeah.
What is your process like fighting through that? Because a lot of people really don't know how to handle injuries and aren't used to getting them. But obviously you've been someone who's very experienced with that, and I'm sure that's been super hard for you. So how have you been able to battle with that and be able to overcome it?
Oh man, over time I've gotten a more positive. I know it's hard to look at injuries in a positive light, but at the end of the day, if I was just going to be sad and down about it, there was just no way I was going to get out of that rut. So I definitely have had to work on my process, because, you know, sometimes I was like sitting there just devastated and having to pull myself out of that very many times. My coaches, my family, they helped me a lot from that too, just from, getting at such low, moments after injuries. But like I said, as I grown, it's just like, oh, it's another injury. You're going to rehab it. You're going to take some time off, and then you're going to come back even stronger. And that's exactly what I felt like for, these surgeries. But my first surgery was, I've had many injuries, but my first surgery was my right shoulder. And after that one was really hard for me. And I got my surgery in 2018, and 2018 actually became a very hard year, just personally and physically. And then having this surgery on my left side, I knew what I was getting into. I knew the pain tolerance. I knew all of that. So I definitely came into this injury a lot, more positive and being like, hey, you're okay. You're going to come back stronger. And it sounds weird, but I have had a lot, like my confidence has built a lot more, because I'm like, man, once I am healthy, it is over for all these girls.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it's got to be so hard for you, just having so many setbacks with that. It's got to be really hard.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was definitely hard. It's hard to swallow every time you get an injury. You're like, okay, this happened. And for me, I do a really good job at trying to see, which I don't know if this is good in the real world, but in the wrestling world, I see things very logically. I can't, like, yes, I get down, but I'm like, logically, is this going to help me? Is me crying in my room for 2 days going to help me get better? No. So I just reroute that, and I'm like, okay, let's see what can I do to get better? What can I do to get healthier? And just being able to reroute that mindset, I think, has helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure being in the environment too, being in Colorado Springs, where basically, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. If you're wrestling in an RTC or something, there's a whole college campus there. There's a lot of things to do. But in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center, it's all wrestling, and you're there for wrestling. That's pretty much it. So I'm sure being injured and having everybody surrounding you, going to practice every day, being committed to chasing their goals, and you have to kind of sit back and watch. It's got to be really, really hard. So yeah, that's a tough place to be in. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was. And like my first surgery, that was really tough, because I was younger. I was a couple of years younger and not as mature. And so having to go into practice, because you still, when you're injured here, you still have to go into practice. And I would do rehab and stuff while like, and not just sit there. But it's really hard, because you start getting inside your head and you're watching some of your competition, and you're like, oh man, they're getting better. I'm just over here injured. So it definitely is hard to watch a lot of your opponents just continue to get better. But again, I started rerouting my thinking, because I'm like, me just being angry or being sad that I can't be on the mat is not going to help me. So I just rearrange it. I'm like, you know what? That's their process, and this is my process, and I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to get healthy, and then it's over for all of them.
And I'm sure you too, like you on the side, were still able to get better in other ways, improve your mentality, technique stuff. I'm sure you had, like you said, your own process to get better through that. Did you do much like technique, journaling, stuff like that? Did you do much mentality work while you're rehabbing?
Yes, I actually started watching film, which is something I was not good at growing up, because it always made me really anxious to watch film. But when you're on the treadmill, or like me, I was always on the Stairmaster, because it made me work out even harder. I wouldn't want to just do nothing or watch nothing. So I started watching film. I started journaling even more, because like I said, I started rerouting that thought process. I'm like, okay, I can't get better on the mat, but if I watch film, if I start, implementing these techniques that they teach us for, sports psych, maybe I can get the upper edge on, you know, my competition or anything like that. So definitely helped me in other areas, because before, I'm telling you, Aaron used to be like, Maya, you need to watch film. And I'd be like, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. So definitely helped me and made me more mature in that aspect.
That's funny. I absolutely love watching film. I love watching wrestling. But did you watch with like your opponents, or did you watch other wrestlers to learn from, or did you just watch your opponents?
I started with my opponents. And then like, you know, I'm still growing in this. So I started watching my opponents, and then I would watch, you know, other people. Like sometimes, like even now, I'll watch Adeline. What, some days I'll watch Vicky. Some days I'll watch Tamara. Some days I'll watch Jakara. And just, you know, picking apart their matches as well, because they do a lot of great things that I would like to do. And then this, I'm still trying to work on this part. Then I started watching film on myself and have to pick myself apart and, you know, see the mistakes where I'm at, and I, for me, that makes me a little anxious because I'm so hypercritical of myself. So I'm definitely intertwining that more into it, but it's definitely, like I said, a growing process for me.
That's the hardest part for sure. So you talked about journaling. What was your what did you journal? Did you journal twice a day, like morning and night? What did your journal look like for wrestling?
For wrestling, I would just journal actually during practices, because especially when I was injured, I would just do it during practices. You know, if I would be watching, you know, the girls wrestle, and I'd see something that I liked, or I saw something that, you know, was a mistake, and something that I knew that I did in matches that I needed to change. But being very observant with the people around me and the surroundings that I had. And then when I would start to get more into wrestling after injuries, I would start journaling how I felt during something, or because sometimes I get frustrated and then I have to, you know, just take it back, look at my journal. And then I also journal, you know, what I want to get done in a practice, because I like to be very intentional in practices, especially because I've had so many injuries. Being very intentional when I get on the mat actually helps my wrestling and make sure that I'm not just tiring my body out for no reason.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. I've recently started journaling for my wrestling, and I'm just trying to get a hold on what I should be writing down. I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it, but there's a lot there, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely different for everyone, because I know there's some of my notes that probably no one would be able to understand, but if I can understand it, that's all that matters.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
you know, little things where I put my hand, where I put my leg. Like sometimes I'll draw a little picture, and I'm not a great artist, so people will definitely not understand some of my notes, but I understand it. So, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm also sure, like, being in that environment of all the Team USA girls in Colorado Springs, because like for men's wrestling, there's a lot more RTC involvement. Like not nearly the amount of men are there compared to the women, like the top level athletes. So what is the, I guess, the aspect there, the family aspect, and just the environment in Colorado Springs at the OTC, like for the women's wrestlers there?
Man, I love my teammates up here. But you know, when we're in the wrestling room, we push each other hard. Like you probably wouldn't even know that we're friends while we're wrestling, because we really try to, you know, beat each other up. So, and that's what the type of energy you want in a room.
Right.
And we definitely all feed off of that. But outside the wrestling room, like Jakara is my best friend, Tamara, good friend, Sarah, she's a good friend, Adeline, good friend, Aaron Golston, one of my best friends. Like, so we're really friendly outside of the wrestling room, but when we're in the wrestling room, we just, you know, leave all our feelings out the door, because once we step in there, we're trying to be the best in the world.
Right. For sure. So when you're, how many workouts a day, like on a normal basis? What does a week look like at the OTC?
So on a normal basis, our scheduled practices, we have 2-a-days every day except for Wednesday. Wednesday, usually we only have one practice. And then the weekends are kind of on our own, where it's like you're expected to do something because as a high level athlete, you should want to get better at every time of the day. But so usually like Saturdays, they'll schedule like a run or something to get outside. And then Sunday we'll have off. If you're that type of person who wants off. I know for me, I usually would wake up at 6 a.m. and I would get like some breakfast in me, and then I would go for a run. And then by 9, we would have mat practice. And then in the middle of the day, I would go to sports med and do rehab, anything that I needed for my body to feel good and fit in lunch sometime during the middle of the day. And then we have like a 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, depending on our scheduling, mat practice or a lift, depending on our scheduling as well.
Right.
And then a lot of us would like sauna and stuff just to feel good at the end, because you got to stretch and make sure your bones aren't all curdled after you're done working out for all that day. But that's like a normal day in the life of Maya.
So how are you able to get on the mat right now? Or are you still off in rehab right now?
I'm not able to get on the mat. I probably won't even be on the mat until sometime next year. Just because I don't want to go back too soon and rip this shoulder up again. That is probably worse than getting injured the first time.
Yeah, that would not be good. So once you get back, obviously that'll probably time really well that you have your good rest period, and then you'll get right up to peak for the Olympics. What are some of your goals for the future? How long do you plan to stay in wrestling, and then what are your plans after? You want to coach, get into MMA maybe? What are your plans?
I am a very free spirit, so I'm very much like go with the flow. So after wrestling, I'm just going to see where life takes me. But definitely in wrestling, I have committed to another 4 years after this Olympic cycle. I've talked to my coaches, Ike Anderson, and so we are agreed that I am committed to another 4 years, which is nice. And then, Olympic title, that's definitely number one on the list. After that, I don't know, if the wind blows me towards MMA, cool. If it blows me towards coaching, that'd be cool too. But like I said, I'm really go with the flow. I'm very chill, down to earth. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be okay, and life's going to take me in the direction that I'm supposed to go.
Right. Yeah. So, but the coaching opportunities, I'm hoping, will start opening up for women.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Like, Helen got hired at the Maryland RTC recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, I have high hopes for D1 wrestling at the women's level. That would be fantastic, and we're pushing that very hard. And I think we're getting close. And hopefully in the next 5 or so years it can start to get established. But how do you see that going about, and how would you like to involve yourself in the NCAA women's wrestling?
I actually have not had much thought to it. When you're an athlete, you have to be very selfish. So I haven't really thought much about it. Am I happy? Whenever we get news about it, I'm ecstatic, because, those are opportunities I would have loved to have while I was growing up. So whenever I see, NCAA emerging sports, I'm like, yes. Whenever I see, people like beautiful Helen Morales out there, being a coach, I'm like, this is amazing. And I can't wait to see more of my friends go into that and being able to, coach these girls and be role models and be able to mentor these girls. Actually, mentoring is something that I'm very big on, just because I didn't have a lot of that growing up, especially when it came to other women wrestlers, because, we're very spread out. So you can't just see them all the time. But if I were to be involved into any of that, it's definitely like a mentorship program, because there's a lot of these girls that are the first in their families to go to college. They're the first, girls in their high school to be able to wrestle against the boys, or, there's a lot of firsts. So to be able to mentor them and get them through that would be amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm really, really excited for the future of women's wrestling. It's growing really fast, and hopefully we can keep it growing.
I know, I'm super excited, and it keeps growing. That's the biggest thing and the most exciting thing to see. It just keeps growing, and our competition is getting a lot higher and a lot harder, and I love it.
And people are starting to realize that it's a growing sport too, and people are starting to watch it more and more. And I think as we start to push it more, people will accept it, and that's kind of what we need right now is the whole community to accept it.
For sure. And I think a lot, like when me growing up, and my message has always been, I am for equality across the board. Most of these girls, they just want to be wrestlers, and they just want to be able to wrestle and not have to worry about all of these battles that, me and my friends are fighting every day. And, maybe one day we can get there. And I know we're definitely growing and going towards that. But let me tell you, it's a little exhausting having to fight 3 different battles on top of fighting this woman.
Right.
But we're getting there. We're definitely getting there.
Yeah. And I'm very excited. I think there's a lot to look forward to for this sport.
For sure. All
right, Maya. Well, that's about all I have for you. Do you have anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you'd like to say before we leave?
I don't really have anything to say. Sanctioned girls wrestling throughout all of the nation, man.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed the interview.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.